Let me remind you and kind of step you back to last year at this time. It was almost the same exact day. We were talking about the new report card because the new report card had two major changes to it. It had new report card measures and new tests. And so I used the example that really we were comparing apples and bananas at that point, because the data was completely different with different tests and different report card measures because they had made dramatic changes. And then in the middle I said, but we do have district data that we called the oranges that were consistent all the way from 2013 to 16 that we can look at that data. So kind of despite the changes in the state data, at least we have really relied more on our own district data because we've got multiple years of the same sources. Tonight, I'm actually going to do something similar. These were the changes last year. Third year in a row, if you remember the changes in the testing. So now we've actually had 2 years of consistent state tests. It was the first year 2 years ago for the online assessment and the changes. So here's how I describe this year. This year, we have the bananas that I showed you last year, and we have kind of a combination of bananas and peaches this year. Some data is the same and a consistent measure, but they made some changes again. And then again, we have our oranges in the middle. Now we have data that's consistent from 2013 to 17 that I'll share with you tonight. So I can't say that they didn't touch the report card because they did. They still made changes in it that have been kind of a multi-year phase-in. Here's the changes. Now on the report card, there's no reference whatsoever to the old OGT indicators. That's gone now. There were just a few students left in that senior year who were still under the OGT, but that is nowhere on the report card. Value added they're using 2 years of data instead of what is really recommended, or the 3 years of data. If you remember, the state suspended all use of value added data because they kept changing the tests. Well, now we do have 2 years worth of data that we'll show you tonight. And then the tough thing for us is when the targets are still increasing. From last year to this year, 4 different indicators on the report card, the targets increased. So you may, your achievement may increase, but the bar is higher on the total number of indicators met. It's all now up to 80%. The gifted indicator, prepared for success, is like the ACT and things like that. And the gap closure measure, those 4 moved up. So that's why you get half a banana and half a peach kind of blended because the report card changed. But we do have our map data that is consistent that I can show you tonight from 2013 through 2017. It doesn't make it any easier though with the report card, because as you know, that is what we're under, although it's very complicated to communicate this out to the public and explain how these measures change. So here's where we are. Here's kind of this apple category in 15-16, and then last year I showed you that 16-17, and then this year. The first 2 categories are obviously the greatest news for us, is that last year I talked to you about how we were seeing for the first time in those early elementary grades that students were ending the year reading on grade level or a hair away from being on grade level. And we're seeing now in K-3 literacy that progress is continuing, that we're seeing that increase in the K-3 literacy because we've moved all the way up to a C. Under Mary Kelly's leadership over there, the humble leadership of Mary Kelly over there, our 3rd grade guarantee, we hit 99%. of promoting students on to third grade after incredibly intensive reading intervention during the year, and having nearly one-to-one type of intervention plus summer school where we continue to work with students. We ended up with 99% of the students moving forward. And that is, no one competes with us in this area across, especially the large urban districts across the state and many suburban districts. We do a beautiful job with that. Then when you move down, here's where we struggle to hit the indicators. Two things, when you think about the report card, what's happened over these years is two major things. The assessments have gotten tougher, and the bar has been raised simultaneously. So our gap actually has gotten bigger over that time period. So the tests have gotten harder. Last year, the state warned all districts that you'll probably lose an average of 2 grades on the report card. Across the state, that's what happened because the tests were harder. And then they've increased the cut score to get to 80% now, which that results in gaps for us. So that's the tough part. That's the tough part for us to be under those requirements, and it's a tough part to continue to try to close those gaps when the bars keep moving, but we have to. Last year I explained that this year was going to be sort of a new baseline for us to now set the trajectory. 5 years ago, our proficiency in achievement, we were ranging 3rd grade through 10th grade. We were somewhere between mid 50% proficiency in reading and math, all the way up to 80% in high school. Now with the new tests, we are down to a range between generally 25% proficiency to 60%. So you can see kind of a 20-point drop is where now our new baseline is, when we have to get to 80%. Okay? That's the tough reality that these incredible people across the room deal with every single day. That 20 to 30 point drop, and we're starting over basically. It feels like we're starting over. It actually feels like I've been in the district, this is my 30th year. It feels like where we were about 20 years ago, where we had to start that trajectory that we've been on, and now we dropped 20 points, and now we're starting over again. Okay? Doesn't make it any easier for us every day. So here's where, when we just dive into that achievement, so even though all the scores with the new tests that came last year that dropped down that 20 to 25 point drop, from last year to this year, we've seen these kind of increases. So we are on that trajectory back up. Given, hopefully, that I will see us back to where we started before I retire from this district is my goal, since I'm in my 30th year. The goal is for this team to be able to get us back up to where we were hitting those indicators at 80% like we used to. You remember most of the high school indicators we hit back in under the old tests, under the old OGT, and even before then, New Higher Proficiency Test. So we saw, the good news is we saw these increases, which are very strong increases in reading. At the high school, here's one major cautionary note, and the state knows that this is a problem. At the high school, under the old report card, they only had on the indicator the kids who took the test for the first time. They took the OGT for the first time, and then that was reported out. Under this new report card this year with new measures, they took these new tests, and anyone who took the test for the first time is in the data, and any student who retook it again because they scored low the first time, their results are in this report card measure. So if you think about that just for a second, that means, again, we're comparing apples and oranges. It's kids who took the test for the first time plus the lowest performing kids who retake it because they want to increase their score. All their scores are dumped in there too. That's not a good thing to do measurement-wise, obviously, to put those retakes in there too, because I can't report to you exactly how we're doing based on the report card, because there's these second and third attempt scores that are included in those results. The state is going to change that. We've already had a phone conference with them, and they pledged to change that for next year's report card. But for this year, know that any high school result, you're looking at the first time kids took the test and every time they've retaken the test. That score also got added in, which tends to be lower scores. If you know, the kids who are retaking it are the kids who scored low.
So in essence, one kid could have 3 scores in that average?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, under the old report card, they separated that out. We had a 10th grade OGT, then we had 11th grade OGT, so the retakes were separate. For some reason, they combined them, and they know on the phone conference, the Ohio Wayne had a phone conference, and they all said, we know it's a problem, we shouldn't have done it, and we're gonna work with the U.S. Department of Ed to separate it out next year. So we should see that.
I'm sorry, is that the only area they're gonna change in the report card, those two?
Just the high school, and the same thing for math and science and social studies, any high school exam, and you'll see that when we come to. So here's where we are for reading and English language arts. Here's math. We have some strong increases, again, from elementary, and then some in middle, and then high school, again, this is retake, so our Howard Lawson is working to carve out those retakes so we know where we are, but it's not going to show up on the report card separate. It'll be combined. And then finally, for science and social studies, the increases, American government had a large increase.
Didn't we change how we give that class as well? Isn't that why?
Right. So the summary then is 82% of our elementary grade levels and subjects improved. So we have to be happy about that. That's this trajectory that we're saying, especially when we're seeing from elementary, the more we get kids reading on grade level, the more we're seeing that change, right, continue to improve then middle school performance and then high school performance. And then the middle school, it was 50%, which was not good enough for us, and we're gonna work very carefully to get that also at the same kind of trajectory as the elementary. And then this is where we're gonna have to report this out to you later once we are able to separate out those scores, because it's difficult to compare the retakes.